that the fire had begun with a few drops of oil spilled onto a kitchen fire, and that the undercook, who stood near to the stove, had felt compelled to extinguish the fire by throwing upon it a pitcher of water, and then, in her excitement, fanning the flames with a cloth she was holding. Some 20 persons in the upper stories of the hotel were trapped in their rooms and burned to death. One of these, Miles Chapin from the chemistry faculty, and what he was doing in a hotel room when his wife and child were safely at home on Wheelock Street, I should not like to speculate. Perhaps it was his compromised circumstances that made the man hesitate just a second when he should not have. But surprisingly, only one of the kitchen staff perished, owing to the fact that the back door had been left open, and the fire, moving with the particular drafts between door and windows, sped toward the dining room, and thus allowed most of the staff to escape unharmed, including the hapless undercook who had started it all with her fluster. The hotel was situated directly across from Thrupp College, where I was then engaged as the Cornish professor of English literature and rhetoric. Thrupp was, and is, even now as I set down my story, a men's school of, shall we say, modest reputation. Its buildings are a motley collection, some of them truly hideous, erected at the beginning of the last century by men who envisioned a seminary, but later contented themselves with a small enclave of intellectual inquiry and classical education. There was one impressive Georgian building that housed the administration, but it was surrounded by altogether too many dark brick structures with small windows and oddly placed turrets that were emblematic of perhaps the most dismal period of American architecture, which is to say early Victorian Gothic. Some of these edifices surrounded the quadrangle. The rest spilled along the streets of a town that was all but dominated by the college. Because the school had elected to retain the flavor of a small New England village, however, the colonial clapboard houses that lined Wheelock Street had been left intact and served as residences for the more eminent figures in the various faculties. At the outskirts of town, before the granite hills began, lay the farms, struggling enterprises that had been witness to generations of men trying to eke out a living from the rocky soil that always put me in mind of thin, elderly women. We ousted, and therefore fortunate diners, stood at the center of this universe, too stunned yet to begin to shiver in earnest from the cold and the snow that soaked our boots. Many people were squinting at the blaze, or had thrown their arms over their eyes, and were staggering backward from the heat. Somewhat bewildered myself, I moved aimlessly through the throng, not having the wits to walk across the quadrangle to Warham Hall, where I might have attained my bed. And so it was that my eyes were caught in the midst of this chaos by the sight of a woman who was standing near a lamp-post. I have always been a man who, when glancing at a woman, looks first at the face and then at the waist, those shallow curves that so signal youth and vitality, and then thirdly at the hair, assessing in an instant its gloss and length. I know that there are men for whom the reverse is true, or men whose eyes fix inevitably upon the bodice of a dress and then hope for a glimpse of calf. But on that night I was incapable of parsing the woman in question in such a calculated manner, simply because I was too riveted by the whole. I will not say plain, for who of us is entirely plain in youth? But neither will I say beautiful, for there was about her face and person a strength of color and of feature that rendered her neither delicate nor pliant, attributes I had previously thought necessary for any consideration of true feminine beauty. She had immoderate height as well, which is often off-putting in a woman.